Today I'm answering landlords' questions. My name's Daniel Hale. I'm a real estate agent that works with a ton of landlords and investors all across Ontario. And this landlord right here is asking about selling a house with tenants on a fixed term lease. They wrote, detached house, the owner, me, occupies main floor basement, rented to tenants as of February 2025, which is this year, with a 1-year lease agreement. I'd like to know what my options are for an early termination of the 1-year lease agreement in the event that I sell my house. The N12 doesn't work because the N12 date can be set to the end of the 1-year lease. Is it acceptable for landlords and tenants to mutually agree on early lease termination in exchange for compensation? Let's break this down. It's a very common question that I get asked a lot on this channel and from investors. So the first thing here, his tenant is on a fixed term of 1 year that started in February 2025, which means that that tenancy is going to end at the end of January 2026. Now, at the time of this video, we are currently in November. So the first thing I would say to him is that if your tenant does not agree to move out, which they do have the right to stay in the home during the sale, especially on a fixed term lease, they also have the right to finish their lease. I would still recommend putting the house up for sale during this time. Now, the reason for that is because some people don't want to close until 60 days, 90 days, and you can even request for the closing date to be in February, which would be at the end of this tenant's fixed term, which means that the N12 actually does apply. Now, for those of you that don't know, the N12 is a notice that you serve your tenant to end your tenancy. You can use it for multiple things. It has to be within the landlord and tenant board guidelines. But for this specific case, he would be serving the N12 notice of eviction for the buyer's personal use. Now, you can't have the termination date on the N12 before the end of that fixed term. It has to be at the end of the fixed term lease. So in this case, February 1st, he could get vacant possession if he served that N12 and had the termination date at the end of January. That's the last day of the tenant's fixed term when he would be moving out. And in today's market, we all know it can take a month, maybe 2 months, sometimes longer to sell a house. And if you put that house up on the market, the tenant's gonna see that you actually have real intentions of selling the house. Nowadays, there are a lot of landlords out there that lie to their tenants, tell them they're gonna sell just to get them out of the house. Then they don't sell the house and they actually rent it out for more, which is highly illegal in Ontario. So a lot of tenants have their backs against the wall and they don't believe what landlords are telling them because they think they just want them out so that they can raise the rent. So if you put the house up for sale, it does show the tenant that you have true, honest intentions and you are looking to sell. This will also help you with negotiations with the tenant because when they believe that you have real intentions on selling your home, they will then communicate with you further and you can hopefully strike a deal with the tenant, because I'm telling you guys, it's always best if you work something out with your tenant and you have an agreement amongst the landlord and the tenant. It always works out for both parties. I'm telling you, I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times. Now, the next thing he says here is, I'd like to know what the options are for an early termination of the 1-year lease agreement in the event that I sell my house. If you're terminating the tenancy earlier, the tenant must agree to this. You cannot force it on the tenant. If they have that fixed term, you have to abide by that fixed term. Doesn't matter what the scenario is. Now, if the tenant does agree to ending the fixed term, then what you can do is you can sign an N11. The N11 is a notice to end the tenancy amongst the landlord and the tenant. It means you guys agreed. You put down the date that the tenancy is going to be terminated on the N11 and everybody signs. Now, I have seen this happen. It's more of a rare thing unless the tenant is getting compensation. Some tenants, though, if they don't want to go through the hassle of having people come into their house every 24 hours to view it and being interrupted, it's a little annoying for them when they're trying to enjoy their living space and there's constant showings of random people coming in the house. So sometimes they will sign the N11 and agree, in which case, if they sign it, you can wait for them to move out and you can list your home for sale vacant, or you can still put it up on the market at that time and you know when your tenant's gonna leave. But in that case, if they sign the N11, wait for them to move out, you can clean up the house, you can show it, list it vacant, people will know there's no tenants there. You're gonna have a lot easier of a time with your sale. Now the last thing here he says, is it acceptable for landlords and tenants to mutually agree on early lease termination in exchange for compensation? Now this is the same thing as the N11. You're using the same form for early termination of that tenancy. Compensation has become more common. Now, 3-4 years ago, the term cash for keys actually kicked in and came into play, where people would pay their tenants to leave their house because Ontario wasn't doing any evictions. They put like a year pause on those. So the only way to get somebody out was to actually pay that tenant. So cash for keys came into play. Now it's still in play, but from what I've seen and what I've noticed, the compensation amount has now drastically changed a lot. It was a lot higher then. Now it's come down a lot more. And the reason for that is because the landlord and tenant board delays are not as long. They're right now, currently at the time of this video, about 3 to 4 months until a hearing date. 3-4 years ago, you'd have a hearing date in 8 months and it'd take you a year to get the tenant out. Now, if they're a really problematic tenant and they really want to fight it and you need to go to a sheriff, you're looking at around 6 to 8 months. But to answer his question, absolutely, you can work out compensation. If the tenant asks for an astronomical amount of money though, don't do it. If they ask for something reasonable that you feel they've been a great tenant, it works, it helps them out, then I do agree with this. I think it's you know, helps them, helps you, it helps everybody. You know, you get your house, you can sell it vacant. But if it's a crazy amount of money, then I say don't do it, okay? Now, keep in mind everything that I said here. Only person that can evict the tenant is the landlord and tenant board. If you serve your tenant an N12 at the end of their fixed term lease, do not ever guarantee vacant possession on that specific date. You must have a clause in your agreement of purchase and sale that allows you to extend the closing date if the tenant fights it and you need to go to a landlord and tenant board hearing. Because if you do not do this and you get to the closing date, which I've seen happen so many times, people sell their house the wrong way, you can end up in a liability situation because the tenant refuses to move out on the closing date, and now guess what? The buyer wants to sue you and they start seeking legal advice and you've got yourself in a massive mess. So make sure you don't do that. Hire the right person to sell your house. If you need some help selling your tenanted property, shoot me an email, send me a text, or give me a call. I'd be happy to help you guys.